Hi, welcome to our fourth lesson on opening our hearts and practicing loving kindness meditations. This is also a very difficult topic. If you remember our very first lesson, we talked about how messy our minds are and how it can be really difficult to want to enter into that space. In normal life, we feel our hearts, I think similarly, can be quite overwhelming places, quite tender places that we would rather kind of detach from and stay at a distance. And so entering into that can feel unnerving. And this is especially true with everything happening today around us. There's a lot of anger, a lot of grief, a lot of fear and uncertainty. And we're at a moment where it can feel tempting to shut it down. And we're going to actually address this head on about why practicing loving kindness needs to be part of a struggle against what the Black feminist theorist Bell Hooks calls a culture of domination. But to begin, we'll start at kind of even a more basic level that a lot of us are socialized into having low self-esteem. We find that pretty natural to have the ability to connect really quickly to a list of all the terrible things that we have done, all the problems that we have, all of our failures, and much harder to connect to a general positive sense of ourselves. And this actually came up. An American teacher was talking to the Dalai Lama about trying to help people with loving kindness. And she says, when I teach people, they find it really difficult to connect to this warm, gentle, tender, loving kindness towards themselves. They connect to critics, but that sense of warm regard they find really hard to hold. They sometimes will even say that they don't feel like they deserve that kind of happiness, that warmth, that it would be selfish or bad to feel that way to them. And she's asking, what do we do, Dalai Lama? And the Dalai Lama turns to his translator and they have this really long conversation. And then the translator looks back at the practitioner and says, the Dalai Lama doesn't know what you're talking about. And they have, again, trying to unpack this, and the Dalai Lama is just completely surprised because this notion of low self-esteem to him was so foreign, so unexpected. And he even says, I thought I really knew the intricacies of the human mind, but this is an experience, a reality, an aspect of life that's really unfamiliar. But for, again, most of us seems pretty basic that, oh yeah, of course I have this ongoing kind of low self-esteem or low self-regard, or at least struggle to feel this kind of innate kindness and positivity toward myself. And some of this has to do with the ways that our society set up in a particular kind of cultural of domination, which, as I said, is a term that was theorized by Bell Hooks. And in this context, power is always power over. And this power over or control over is rooted in violence, either the direct threat of physical violence or the violence of taking away, removing access to the things that people need to sustain their lives with dignity. In this context, vulnerability is a liability. To be vulnerable is to be open to the power and control of someone else. Other people are seen as threats, right? Either I have power over you or you have power over me, and we're trying to negotiate this, and I need to keep my chest closed, stay guarded so that you don't wound and take advantage of my heart. And then it demands self-negation. And she says, especially of marginalized communities, because the dominant community reads the self-assertion of life by others as a threat to itself, to its own power. And so it demands this kind of self-negation, this withdrawal, this closed off way of living in the world. And for Bell Hooks, this is fundamentally anti-love. Teaches us not to love ourselves and not to love others, because it's always rooted in this sense of need to control, need to have the power over so that one is not subordinated and taken advantage of. And following Bell Hooks, she says that actually the practice of love, of building love, is vital for us. quote, dominator thinking, so the thinking that goes in these cultures of domination, and dominator practice relies for its maintenance on the constant production of a feeling of lack, of the need to grasp. Giving love offers us a way to end this suffering. Loving ourselves, extending that love to everything beyond the self, we experience wholeness. So she actually wants to say, this movement towards love, toward ourself, and opening it up to others is how we struggle. It has to be part of how we struggle against the cultures of domination that use their power to make us feel like we're constantly living in a state of lack, that we need to grasp, to maintain control, to hold everything on and hold everything in, because otherwise the violence will come at us. And so she says we need to practice giving love. So the on-the-spot kind of practice for this week are two. One is the actual act of generosity, even if you don't feel it. This is a point where the things that we do, the practices that we partake of, actually change our experience. And so you can ask yourself a question: what are you holding on to? What am I holding on to that I could give away to benefit others? And this doesn't have to be a material possession, but think through that. That's an on-the-spot practice, something you can be doing throughout the day, looking for chances to practice generosity. And then you can also do kind of the other movement. And this is a virtuous circle, right? You may not feel it in your heart, so you start a practice, or maybe you are doing these practices, but it's not connecting to your heart, so you kind of build one into the other. And you can practice opening your heart to yourself and others. And ask yourself, how can I rest my heart in a wholeness that holds me up, that grounds and supports me, so that I'm not living with that sense of scarcity and lack, but can open my heart to the world around me. So this is going to bring us into kind of our daily practice, which is a traditional loving kindness meditation, where we try to connect to that warm regard, that kindness, gentleness, tenderness that we have, and direct that to ourselves and to other people. One of the things to note is that loving kindness and compassion aren't just innate capacities, they're actually skills. So they're things that we can do to practice to get better at them. It's not just either you're born this way or made this way, but you can actually increase your capacity to live with that love, with that compassion. And you do that through practices. So here's a meditation practice. I'll walk you through how you can be doing this each day at home, again with your 10 minutes a day ideal practice time. So first is, you want to try to connect with that expansive, loving kindness, to connect with that soft, open heart. So you sit in your meditation. As I said, sometimes it's hard. It doesn't feel natural to come to us if we start with ourselves. So you can think of anything, a person, an event, a pet that gives you that sense of like, oh, I do wish positive good things towards you, or I feel that sense of warmth and kindness when I imagine that. You can even start with someone else, a particular person. Like, all right, when I think of this person, I can feel my soft heart. I can feel that presence in me. And so however it is you want to connect with that, you do that. And then you can choose a mantra or a slogan. The traditional one is, may this person, that person, I, them, enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. But you can try out other ones, see what works. May they find joy in life. May they be happy. May they be at peace. Whatever it is that feels like it resonates in you. And then you connect to that slogan, that feeling, and you go through a process, directing it to yourself. May I enjoy happiness. May I find deep joy. And then you direct it to someone you care about. And again, I said you can actually reverse these two. Sometimes it's easier to start with someone that you care about. May this person feel deep happiness, and then go to yourself, may I feel it. And then the third, you move to kind of a neutral person, neither a friend nor someone that you struggle with, just someone that you're like, oh yeah, saw this person passing on the street, or their coworker or a student, part of my organization, or someone in a class, someone in your neighborhood, just a neutral person. And then moving to a difficult person. Now we're training, we're practicing, right? So you don't want to start with your biggest enemy, but just starting with someone that maybe feels a little difficult for you in that moment. And can you expand that loving kindness, knowing that they want happiness in their life, and could you wish that toward them? And then you expand out to all people. May all people enjoy happiness in the root of happiness. And again, in this, it's a mindfulness practice, so we're just being with our own experience in the moment. As I said, you can start with whatever it is that feels easiest to help your heart feel soft and present in the reality, that you cannot be so shoving everything down and closing everything off, but you could be present to that tenderness that's there already. Some people will have little difficulty connecting to this. Maybe they'll find like, okay, I can find that loving kindness if I think about someone that I care about, but as soon as I try to direct it to myself, I feel nothing. I feel that emptiness. And if that's where you're at, that's okay. Again, no judgment. You can try having compassion for yourself, right? It's hard to feel like this. It's confusing to feel like this. This is difficult to not be able to access this, or to sit here saying this mantra, this slogan, and not being able to make that sort of connection. And then if you get distracted, you return to your breath and to that open heart and start again. No judgment. So that's the weekly practice. Again, I know that that is difficult right now in the moment that we're in, to find our open hearts, but please, as best as you can, experiment with this, because as Bell Hooks said, this is key to the longevity of our struggle, to create another way of living that's not grounded and rooted in that culture of domination, where we have to close our hearts to ourselves and to others because it's the only way that we can feel safe. So be wise, be courageous in your practice, and see what happens. Thanks.